Another beautiful evening and another moth trapping video. This is the 17th of July and conditions are just beautiful for moth trapping this evening. There's no breeze, the temperature is pleasantly warm into the high teens. It's been a lovely day today, and although generally cloudy, it's been nice and warm. It's warm for the next few days, and conditions for moth trapping over the next few nights is ideal. So I really need to try and make the most of these suitable nights before the weather turns a little bit less seasonal at the weekend. This is Eakring, in particular the edge of Lound Wood, just in the process of getting set up, and then it'll be cup of tea time before we fire up. Well, we're up and running. It's about 20 to 10. It's a grand old evening, and let's hope we get a fair few moths and a nice range of species come in. Well, that's the view from where I'm sat. No moths coming in as yet. Still very light. It's only 9:45. But a nice location. I'm not just sat at the side of a cornfield. There's also deciduous woodland here too, and we're on this set aside strip, this 6-metre set aside strip that goes around much of the land here, owned and farmed by Jim Meanley in Eakring village. So we've got a good night for it. Let's hope we get a decent range of species. Well, it's a very quiet start. 22:30 already, so 3/4 of an hour of the trapping session has gone by, and admittedly most of that hasn't been under the darkest of skies. We're at that point now where the sky is becoming as dark as it gets in the middle of July. There is a moon low down, but it's hidden behind a veil of high cloud, and it's only a gibbous moon too, so that won't affect any moths coming into the trap. Of the moths that have arrived at the sheet, it's mostly micros, and the only one of note really is one Plutella xylostella, which is the diamondback moth, and is technically a migrant, although I have a sneaky feeling it's probably a breeder now in Nottinghamshire, and certainly it is in the UK, in southern parts of the UK. But it's one of those species which I always tend to think is a tantalising species. You get one, maybe two turn up early on, and you think, is this going to be one of those migrant nights? But it usually isn't, because the last real big migrant year was 2006. There have been sort of others, but 2006 was the mega year for migrants. So quite quiet at the moment, but more moths are starting to appear now, and the second hour should certainly be more productive than what this first hour's been. There's not actually that many flies. There's a few caddis flies knocking around, but it's generally quiet, even for diptera. Well, the rate of moths coming into the light has increased, and so has the species range. It happened pretty much all of a sudden, although saying that, and despite thinking that everything was quite quiet, which it seemed to be at the time, I was building up a steady species list, and now I'm well over 40 species. Moths are starting to go more macros now. Majority of the catch so far is micro moths, and that's good to see, but small numbers of everything, but quite a flurry of activity a few minutes ago. Nothing rare or unusual, but the species range is increasing. The nicest moth in is black archers. Now I'm probably not going to film a great deal. I'll put photos in and I'll go through what's on this list in a minute or two, but very few moths that I would like to film are settling, so you'll have to make do with photographs, I'm afraid, at the moment. But the species list is building very nicely. I wish the grass was shorter, I must admit. For someone with OCD like myself, this sheet should be lovely and flat. I don't like it when it's like this because it looks untidy to me, and I'm sure many of you are thinking exactly the same. But it's holding an increasing number of moths now. We're doing really well. More and more species continue to come in. One of the recent species that's just come in is a Coronet. Always loved to see coronets. Beautiful moth, never used to occur here at one time. One of those moths that has increased in Nottinghamshire in the last 15-20 years, and it's now pretty much everywhere, and a beautiful and very varied moth it is too. Another moth that's also in is a brown line bright eye, and that's a little cracker that's coming home to be photographed. So we're approaching 60 odd species and some really nice moths. Nothing out of the ordinary or that hasn't been recorded here before, but plenty coming in and keeping me on my toes. There doesn't look much activity from this shot, but there are plenty of moths here, more than certainly than it appears. But in terms of other insects, it's still not many at all. Very few species of flies, even numbers of flies. There's a handful of water beetles that are in, but nothing in spectacular numbers, and I thought there would be with these sort of warmer nights. This is the first of the warmer nights. The next two should get progressively warmer by a couple of degrees, but it's very quiet for Diptera. Well, the sheet being how it is and quite soft and almost bouncy, it's very difficult to get in the right position to film anything. But here's a beautiful moth, and this is a small phoenix, very fresh small phoenix, and this is second brood that we're at the start of. But what a super marked species this is. It's common, a moth that you will get in your garden. I've had it at home on an annual basis, and it's a very, very attractive moth. There is a moth called the phoenix, which is quite similar, so care has to be taken to differentiate between the two, but it's always a lovely carpet to get. Superbly marked, absolutely beautiful thing. Well, I said earlier that it was a slow start, and indeed it was, but very soon we were up to 40 species, almost without realising it. We're now up to, well, just a couple of species short of 80 species, and it's been very busy. Not big numbers of moths, but there's been so many moths around, it's been difficult for me to keep up with what's coming in and what's new, and it's a case of keep going around the sheet and checking to see what I've missed, and I've missed quite a lot in amongst the activity, and unfortunately I've not been able to film much at all, and so you'll be looking at quite a few photos if you're watching this moth trapping video. But just going through what we have had, if I can pick out the notable species, Pyrasta despicata is only the second or third record for me. That's a small, dull sort of pyramid moth, and it's nothing spectacular at all, but here it's got quite a rarity value. Well, it has in Nottinghamshire. It's not a common moth in Nottinghamshire. I remember Dillis and I, we caught one on Red Hill many years ago, and I think I might have had it in the garden. So that's coming, and so that's probably the moth of the night, to be honest. A couple of Phyqueta roborella, which is another of the pyralids, nicely marked moths too. If I just try and pick out what we've had in the macro department, a couple of clouded silver, July high flyer. There's 3 of them in at the moment. Bright line brown eye and brown line bright eye, 2 species which always causes confusion. Peach blossom, couple of peach blossom. They're just starting to, this second brood of peach blossom just starting to get a bit faded here and a bit worn. So I'll put a photo in of a nice pristine one if you do not see one before, because it's an absolutely beautiful moth, it really is. And a couple of black arches, but really it's all very common stuff, but it's nice to see a good number of moths at the light. And I'll show you what we've got. Knotgrass is another one that's just popped in, but a good range of micros. There's as many micros as there are macros at the moment, although the macros are now starting to come in and take over the number of micros. All in all, it's a great little session. I'm just having a wander away from the light. I'm only 10 yards away from it. It might look as though I'm a long way, but I'm not. I'm just trying to ease a medical condition that I've invented called moth trapper's knee. I'm sure there's many moth trappers out there that suffer from it. One of those things with kneeling down all the time. So every now and again I like to just get up, just have a walk around the light and around the surrounding area. It's a beautiful night, it really is. The cloud is thin, but I can't see the moon in that southwestern sky. But as you can see, there are a number of larger moths coming in, and I'm going to give it a bit longer just to see if anything really juicy turns up. But had more species tonight than I thought I'd get, I must admit, even allowing for the warmer nights, and hopefully another couple of sessions to come in quick succession. Now then, these 2 moths may well look like 2 different species, but they are one and the same. They're both coronets, and 2 fine examples, especially the one on the left of the screen. That's an absolute cracker. But coronet's one of those moths where probably no 2 coronets are ever marked exactly the same, very variable, but all beautifully and intricately marked. Cracking things. It's a moth that's done really well in Nottinghamshire the last 15 or so years. Really was a rarity at one time, but has done well for whatever reason, whether it's changes in climate, I don't know, but it's a moth that will occur in any habitat. I get this in the garden now. At one time this was very much a dream species, one of those that you would scan through the books and look at and think, if only. Well, times have changed, and no more if onlys, more you cans. And this is a fabulous moth, absolutely beautiful. So that's the coronet, and nice to see 2 together like this. Well, it's 0:45, so I'm happy with the 3-hour session that I've had here this evening at Lound Wood. It's really produced the goods. Nothing in terms of rarities, but moth trapping shouldn't be about rarities. If they come along, all well and good, but it's nice to see well over 80 species. And so time to pack up.